The photograph was taken at 8:14 a.m., according to the faint timestamp burned into its corner. It showed a man and a boy standing at the edge of a Colorado trailhead, mountains rising behind them like indifferent witnesses. The father held the phone at arm's length, squinting slightly into the morning sun. The boy stood half a step behind, hood pulled up, unsure whether to smile. It was an ordinary picture, the kind taken without thinking, and that was what made it unbearable later. The father's name was Daniel Mercer. He was 42, broad-shouldered, and careful by nature. He planned everything, even things meant to be spontaneous. The hike had been his idea, a way to reconnect after months of silence that neither of them knew how to break. He had told his son it would be easy. Just a few hours. A marked trail. Fresh air. No danger. The boy, Ethan, was 13. He trusted his father the way children still do at that age, not because the world felt safe, but because believing in him felt easier than doubt. He carried a small backpack, heavier than it needed to be, filled with things he thought might matter. Extra socks. A flashlight. A notebook he never showed anyone. He did not tell his mother where they were going. Daniel had said he would call when they were done. They never did. By noon, the truck was still parked where Daniel had left it. By evening, the sun slipped behind the peaks, and the temperature dropped fast. When the call finally came, it wasn't from Daniel. It was from a park ranger who said there was no sign of them on the trail. No injuries reported. No witnesses. Just absence. Search crews arrived before dawn the next morning. They followed boot prints pressed into soft dirt, two sets moving side by side, steady and unhurried. The trail curved, climbed, narrowed. Then, without warning, the prints drifted off the marked path. There was no obvious reason. No sign of panic. Just a quiet decision made somewhere between one step and the next. As the hours stretched, the forest seemed to close around the searchers. Wind erased details. Pine needles filled impressions. Radios crackled with nothing useful. Someone suggested they had turned back. Someone else said they were experienced enough not to get lost. Both were wrong. The photograph was released to the public that night. News anchors called it haunting. Online strangers analyzed shadows and posture, convinced they could see warning signs in a frozen moment. No one mentioned how peaceful it looked. No one talked about how alive they still were when it was taken. Somewhere beyond the last confirmed footprint, Daniel realized the trail was gone. The map no longer matched the ground beneath his boots. Ethan noticed first, though he said nothing. The forest had changed its sound, growing quieter, heavier. Daniel stopped walking and looked around, trying to remember when certainty had slipped away. Behind them, night was already beginning to form. Ahead, the mountain waited, patient and vast, as the first real decision of survival pressed down on them both. Neither of them knew that this pause, this breath, would be the last moment before everything they understood about safety quietly collapsed into the darkness ahead. When Daniel stopped walking, the silence felt heavier than the pack on his shoulders. He told himself the trail would reappear if they moved slowly, if they stayed calm. Ethan watched his father turn in a slow circle, eyes scanning trees that all looked the same now. The forest no longer felt like a place meant for people. Daniel chose a direction without admitting it was a guess. They walked until the light thinned and the cold began to bite through their jackets. When Ethan finally asked if they were lost, Daniel answered too quickly. "No," he said, forcing certainty into the word. "Just off trail." The lie settled between them, small but dangerous. Miles away, Daniel's truck remained untouched in the gravel lot. By morning, a ranger noticed it hadn't moved overnight. The license plate led to a name, then to a phone call that rang unanswered. By the time the call reached Ethan's mother, fear had already begun shaping itself into something solid. She drove to the park without packing a bag. Search teams moved fast at first. Dogs caught the scent near the trailhead. Volunteers spread out, calling names into the trees. For a while, hope traveled easily between them. Fresh boot prints appeared in patches of mud, heading uphill. 2 sets. Close together. Someone said that was a good sign. Then the prints thinned. Wind scattered pine needles across them. A small stream cut through the path, washing detail away. On the far bank, there was nothing. The dogs circled, confused, noses lifting toward the air. Radios crackled with updates that sounded more like apologies. By afternoon, doubt crept into every conversation. Maps were checked again. Coordinates repeated. Someone suggested injury. Someone else suggested they had turned back and been missed. The forest offered no answer. It simply absorbed sound and gave nothing back. High above, Daniel realized he had made a mistake he could not undo. The slope had grown steeper, the trees tighter. He could feel the hours slipping away. Ethan's hands were red with cold, his breathing shallow. Daniel stopped again, heart pounding, and admitted they needed to find shelter. As darkness approached, the search below began to slow. Protocol demanded rest. Weather reports warned of freezing temperatures overnight. The official word was careful, measured, and devastating. "We'll resume at first light." Daniel pulled Ethan beneath a low stand of trees and wrapped him in spare clothing. The forest settled around them, alive with unfamiliar sounds. Somewhere far below, voices faded. Above them, something moved, heavy and deliberate, pressing through the undergrowth as the trail went truly cold. Ethan lay awake long after Daniel's breathing slowed, listening. Every snap of wood felt close. Hunger twisted inside him, sharp and constant. He wondered if anyone was calling his name below the trees. He wondered if his father was pretending to sleep. Daniel stared into the dark, counting minutes, measuring risks, trying not to imagine teeth and weight and speed. He promised himself they would move at dawn, find water, correct the error. Above them, the forest answered with a low sound. Not a growl, not quite wind, something patient. The night deepened, and with it the understanding that morning would not bring rescue, only harder choices. Far below, searchlights flickered off one by one. Paperwork replaced shouting. Hope folded itself smaller. On the mountain, a boy waited for instructions that would change him forever, while his father prepared to teach him how to survive the coming day. Unseen, the wilderness tightened its grip, and the story of endurance quietly began without mercy remaining. Morning came without warmth. The light filtered weakly through the trees, pale and distant, as if unsure it belonged there. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, his body stiff from the cold and from holding himself too tightly through the night. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the smell of damp earth and pine returned, and with it the memory of being lost. Daniel was already awake. He sat with his back against a tree, knees pulled in, eyes fixed on nothing. His beard was rimmed with frost. When he noticed Ethan stirring, he forced a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You did good," he said quietly, as if they'd passed some invisible test. Ethan nodded, though he didn't know what that meant. They shared the last of the water in careful sips. Daniel studied the map again, turning it, flattening it, as though the paper might confess to something if handled long enough. Ethan watched his father's hands. They were steady, but slower than usual. That frightened him more than anything else. They started walking downhill, Daniel believing water would lead to people. The forest resisted them at every step. Branches snagged clothing. Rocks rolled beneath their boots. Ethan slipped once, scraping his palm, and felt the sting bloom. He looked up instinctively, expecting reassurance. Daniel gave it, too quickly, already moving ahead. Ethan did not cry. He felt it rise in his chest, hot and urgent, but he pushed it down. Crying felt like something that belonged to safety, to kitchens and blankets and voices that could fix things. Out here, it felt dangerous, like wasting air. By midday, hunger made his thoughts dull. His legs trembled with each step. Daniel noticed, finally, and suggested a break. They sat on a fallen log, the forest pressing close. Daniel tried to joke, something about future stories they'd laugh about. Ethan smiled because he knew he was supposed to. A sound echoed somewhere behind them. Heavy. Measured. Ethan froze. Daniel turned slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. The sound did not repeat. Daniel said it was probably wind. Ethan accepted the answer because he needed to. As they continued, the forest grew quieter. Birds disappeared. Even insects seemed to retreat. Ethan's breathing sounded too loud to his own ears. He walked closer to his father now, almost stepping into his footprints, matching his pace, his rhythm. When Daniel stumbled, it happened quickly. One wrong step, a loose rock, a sharp intake of breath. He fell hard, sliding several feet before stopping. Ethan ran to him, heart pounding. Daniel waved him back at first, then grimaced as he tried to stand. His ankle buckled beneath him. "It's fine," Daniel said, though his voice betrayed him. Ethan knelt anyway, hands hovering, unsure where to touch. The swelling was immediate, angry. Ethan felt something crack inside him then, something fragile. He swallowed hard, refusing the tears again. They moved slower after that. Much slower. Daniel leaned heavily on a branch he shaped into a crude walking stick. Every step cost him. Ethan began to carry more without being asked. The pack, the map, the responsibility. As the light began to fade once more, Daniel stopped them near a cluster of rocks that might offer shelter. He sat heavily, breathing through clenched teeth. Ethan watched him, waiting for instructions, for certainty. Daniel looked up at his son, really looked at him, seeing the fear held back behind determination. "We're going to have to be smart," Daniel said. "Together." Ethan nodded. He still did not cry. But as the forest shifted and shadows lengthened, something else settled into his chest instead. An understanding that whatever was following them, whatever had been watching in silence, had not gone away. And that tonight, it would come closer. Night fell faster than Ethan expected. One moment the forest still held color, bruised blues and fading greens, and the next it was swallowed whole by shadow. The rocks Daniel had chosen offered little protection, but they were something solid in a place that refused to make sense. Ethan gathered pine needles with numb fingers while his father arranged branches into a weak barrier against the wind. The cold returned as soon as the sun disappeared. It crept upward from the ground, seeping through shoes and bones. Daniel wrapped his injured ankle tightly, jaw clenched, refusing to let pain slow his hands. He spoke calmly, explaining each step as if teaching a lesson, not because Ethan needed instruction, but because Daniel needed to believe control still existed. They shared a protein bar, breaking it unevenly. Daniel gave Ethan the larger piece without comment. Ethan noticed and said nothing. Hunger sharpened the silence between them. Somewhere beyond the rocks, the forest shifted, alive with movements they could not see. The sound came after full dark. A heavy exhale. Not wind. Too deliberate. Ethan's body stiffened instantly. Daniel raised his head, listening. Another sound followed, deeper, closer. Branches bent under weight. Something large moved just beyond the edge of their vision. Daniel reached for Ethan without looking, pulling him close. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Ethan nodded, heart pounding so hard he feared it could be heard. The darkness pressed inward, thick and watching. A shape passed between trees, tall and broad, its outline briefly visible against the faint glow of moonlight. The bear did not rush them. It circled slowly, curious, patient. Ethan smelled it before he saw it fully, a musky, rotten scent carried on the air. His breath caught in his throat. Daniel shifted carefully, placing himself between Ethan and the movement, every instinct screaming. The bear stopped. Its breathing was loud now, confident. Ethan felt time stretch, each second unbearable. Daniel whispered instructions, soft and steady, telling Ethan exactly where to look, where not to. He told him not to run, not to scream, not to move unless told. A branch snapped under the bear's weight. It stepped closer. Daniel stood then, slowly, forcing his injured leg to bear him. Pain flashed across his face, raw and undeniable. He raised his arms, made himself larger, his voice low but firm as he spoke into the darkness. The bear hesitated. For a moment, hope flared. Then it lunged. Daniel shoved Ethan backward without thinking. The world erupted into chaos. Ethan hit the ground hard, air knocked from his lungs. He heard his father shout, a sound torn from somewhere deep and desperate. He scrambled upright just in time to see fur and shadow collide with Daniel's body. There was no clear image, only motion and sound. The bear's weight. Daniel's voice breaking as he fought to stay standing. Ethan screamed his father's name, the sound ripping free despite every warning. Daniel turned his head once, eyes locking onto Ethan with terrifying clarity. "Run!" he yelled. "Don't stop." Ethan froze. The command shattered him. He wanted to disobey, to reach out, to fix what could not be fixed. Daniel roared again, louder, more furious than afraid. The bear struck once more, and Ethan stumbled backward, tears finally blinding him. He ran. Branches tore at his skin. Roots sent him sprawling. Behind him, the sounds grew distant, then stopped altogether. Ethan did not slow. He did not look back. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, collapsing beneath a fallen tree as the forest swallowed every trace of what had just happened. He lay shaking in the dark, the echo of his father's voice still ringing in his ears. Somewhere behind him, something moved again, heavy and unhurried. The night settled into silence, and with it came the understanding that nothing would ever be the same, and that the next day would demand a price he was not yet ready to pay. Day 5 arrived with a kind of fatigue that felt heavier than fear. The mountain had not yielded anything new, and the search teams could feel it in their bodies. Boots were muddy, voices hoarse, eyes strained from scanning ground that refused to speak. The optimism of the first days had thinned into routine, and routine had begun to fail. At the command post, maps were covered in handwritten notes and fading highlighter. Coffee cups piled near radios that crackled with less urgency now. A supervisor announced adjusted zones, his voice careful, neutral, as if tone alone could soften the meaning. Resources were being redistributed. Weather was moving in. They needed to be realistic. Ethan's mother stood just outside the tent, wrapped in a borrowed jacket that smelled like someone else's smoke. She listened without interrupting, nodding when required, her hands clenched tight enough to ache. When she asked where they would look next, the answer came with pauses. She heard the truth in those pauses. Up on the mountain, Ethan lay hidden beneath the fallen tree, waking and sleeping in broken pieces. His throat was raw from crying he could no longer stop. Every sound made him flinch. He replayed the night over and over, his father's voice cutting through the dark, the command that had saved him and destroyed everything else. He did not know how long he had been alone. Search dogs were brought back to the point where the trail had vanished. They worked in tight circles, confused, noses lifting toward the air instead of the ground. Handlers exchanged looks they didn't voice. The scent was fragmented now, pulled apart by wind and time and something else no one wanted to name. A tracker crouched near a muddy slope and frowned. There were disturbances there, overlapping impressions that didn't fit the earlier pattern. He radioed it in, choosing his words carefully. The response came back delayed. Mark it. Move on. Focus on survivability zones. By afternoon, volunteers were quietly dismissed. Official teams remained, but their movements slowed, coverage tightened. Hope, once loud, became something spoken under breath. Paperwork increased. Timelines were reviewed. Someone mentioned recovery instead of rescue, then corrected themselves too late. Ethan crawled from beneath the tree as the sun shifted, his body screaming in protest. He limped downhill, guided by instinct more than logic, clutching the memory of his father's instructions like a map. Water kept him alive. Fear kept him moving. He spoke to no one, not even himself. As dusk approached, a light rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. It erased details the search needed. It pressed Ethan deeper into the forest. Radios crackled with final check-ins. The day was being closed. No one said it out loud, but day 5 ended with something breaking. Lines were crossed, decisions made that could not be reversed. Somewhere between forms and fading light, the search began to fracture, even as a boy moved closer to another moment that would demand everything he had left. Night settled with a finality that felt official. The rain cooled the air sharply, and Ethan's steps grew clumsy on slick stone. He slipped hard, pain flaring up his leg, breath knocked loose. He bit down on a scream and kept moving, dragging himself forward through brush. Below, teams packed up unaware. Above, the mountain closed ranks. The next decision would not be about searching anymore, but about surviving damage already done. Blood seeped warm into his sock, unnoticed at first, then undeniable. He thought of his father's limp, lessons learned too late in darkness alone. Night pushed against Ethan's injured leg as he moved downhill, each step sending a sharp reminder through his body that he was no longer whole. The pain had started as a distant throb, easy to ignore while fear drove him forward, but now it screamed with every movement, hot and unforgiving. Blood soaked into his sock, dark and sticky, the warmth frightening in the cold air. He collapsed beneath a stand of young trees, breath coming in shallow bursts. When he pulled his pant leg up, the skin around his ankle was swollen and misshapen, the joint refusing to hold weight. He pressed his forehead into the dirt and cried, not loud, not like before, but quietly, the sound breaking apart inside his chest. By the time dawn came, Ethan could not stand. He dragged himself closer to a rock outcrop, wrapping his jacket tight and waiting for pain to settle. It did not. Hunger gnawed at him, worse than fear now, dulling his thoughts. He remembered his father's hands, how steady they had been, how Daniel had leaned on that branch, refusing to stop. The memory cut deeper than the injury. Far below, the command post stirred again. Briefings grew shorter. Search patterns tightened, then shrank. A medic quietly explained hypothermia timelines. A supervisor nodded, already thinking ahead. The language changed, cautious and procedural, preparing everyone for outcomes no one wanted to name. Ethan tried to move when he heard voices, distant and uncertain. He shouted, the sound tearing his throat, but it came out weak, swallowed by trees. The effort cost him, leaving him shaking and dizzy. He lay back, staring at the sky through branches, wondering if this was how it ended. As the day wore on, clouds thickened, lowering until the mountain felt sealed. Rain began again, light but relentless, chilling his skin. Ethan wrapped his arms around his leg, trying to remember everything Daniel had taught him. Stay awake. Stay alive. Don't panic. The rules felt small now. By afternoon, the pain had become something else, deeper, spreading up his calf, each pulse slower but stronger. He understood, dimly, that the injury was changing, becoming dangerous. Fever crept in, bringing strange thoughts and flashes of his father's voice, calm even when afraid. At the command post, a call came in from a veteran tracker. He described disturbances farther upslope, impressions too large to ignore, overlapping human movement. There was a pause on the line. The supervisor asked him to flag it, nothing more. As evening approached, Ethan tried once more to stand. His leg buckled immediately, sending him crashing sideways. He lay there, breathless, accepting the truth he could no longer outrun. He would not be walking out. He pulled himself into a tighter space between rocks, using his pack as support. The forest watched quietly. Somewhere, heavy movement shifted through undergrowth, distant but present. Ethan closed his eyes, breathing shallow, holding on to one thought. His father had told him survival meant making the next decision, then the next, no matter how small. Ethan opened his eyes again as the light began to fade, understanding that tomorrow would demand something even harder. He would have to move, injured or not, before whatever left those tracks decided to return. Night settled slowly, deliberate and cold. Ethan lay awake, counting breaths, listening to the forest rearrange itself around him. Pain pulsed in time with his heart, steady and threatening. Somewhere far below, teams prepared for another day, unaware that the boy they searched for was slipping toward a turning point that would force nature to reveal what it had taken, and what it had spared. Above him, the mountain held its breath, as if waiting for the moment when tracks would finally matter, and the truth would begin to surface from mud and silence, leading every path back to the choice made in the dark days before, when a father stood, injured but unbroken, between his son and death, setting in motion the discovery that would change everything still to come. The injury was no longer just pain. It was the line dividing escape from endurance, and the moment survival became something earned, not assumed, as nightfall. Night did not arrive suddenly. It crept closer in slow increments, each shadow stretching longer until Ethan felt surrounded without anything having moved. He lay wedged between rocks, injured leg throbbing, eyes fixed on the narrow strip of forest he could see. Every sound felt deliberate now, as if the mountain were choosing when to breathe. He heard movement before he saw anything. A low shift of weight. Leaves pressed flat. The sound traveled through the ground and into his bones. Ethan held his breath, listening hard, trying to separate fear from reality. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that made even insects seem afraid. Something large passed between the trees. He could not see it clearly, only the suggestion of mass, darkness bending darker shadows. The memory of the night with his father slammed into him without warning. Breath. The sound of Daniel shouting. Ethan clamped a hand over his mouth to keep from making noise. He stayed still for a long time. Pain faded into the background, replaced by a sharp awareness of every inch of space around him. He counted his breaths, slow and shallow, the way his father had taught him. The thing moved again, closer now, branches flexing under its weight. Ethan's mind raced. Run was impossible. Climbing was worse. He searched for anything useful, fingers brushing stone, dirt, damp leaves. His pack lay just beyond his reach. He dragged himself forward inch by inch, wincing as his legs screamed in protest. The movement felt impossibly loud. The bear emerged fully into view then, moonlight catching its shape. Massive shoulders rolled beneath thick fur, head low, nose working the air. It did not rush. It did not hesitate. It simply existed, confident and present, the way only something at the top of a food chain could be. Ethan froze. He remembered his father standing tall, injured and terrified, choosing courage anyway. The memory steadied him. He stayed still, eyes lowered, body small. The bear sniffed, took another step, then paused. Its breath fogged the air between them. Far below, search teams ended another day without answers. Radios clicked off. Boots scraped gravel. The mountain remained silent about the boy lying broken above them. No one knew how close truth was to surfacing, or how narrow the window still remaining had become. The bear shifted its weight, turning its head slightly, distracted by something farther upslope. Ethan did not move. Minutes passed. His muscles burned with the effort of stillness. Finally, the bear turned away, crashing softly through brush as it disappeared into darkness. Only then did Ethan allow himself to breathe fully. His body shook uncontrollably. Tears came again, hot and unstoppable, soaking into the dirt. He pressed his face into the ground, grateful and terrified in equal measure. The forest did not relax. Ethan knew that. Predators returned. Hunger persisted. He dragged himself deeper beneath the rocks, making himself smaller, hidden. Sleep came in fractured pieces, haunted by sound and memory, broken dreams, and the ache of absence. At first light, he woke to pain and the distant echo of something else, something new. The ground near him was torn up, pressed deep with unmistakable impressions. Large tracks cut through the mud, overlapping older marks, leading away from where he lay. Ethan stared at them, heart pounding, understanding settling slowly. He felt a strange mix of terror and relief, because signs meant certainty, and certainty meant someone might finally follow the right path upward. Whatever had taken his father had passed close enough to leave proof. And somewhere below, when someone finally saw those tracks, the search would change, and the truth would begin moving toward him whether he was ready or not, while the mountain prepared to give up its secret in stages. Dawn watched silently, as endurance waited to be tested one final time. Soon enough. Morning broke with a strange clarity, the kind that followed long exhaustion rather than hope. By day 12, the search had narrowed to ritual. Crews moved because schedules demanded it, not because belief remained. Then a tracker stopped near a muddy cut above the creek and knelt without speaking. He studied the ground for a long time. Others gathered slowly, sensing the shift. The impressions were deep, uneven, heavy. Too large to ignore. Human prints crossed them, then vanished beneath their weight. The tracker traced the edge with one finger, careful, reverent. "Bear," he said finally, his voice flat. Radios came alive. Commands sharpened. The tone changed instantly, stripped of softness. This was no longer a lost hiker scenario. This was evidence. The search perimeter pivoted uphill, following the tracks as they climbed through wet soil and broken brush. Every step felt like trespassing. They found more signs. Torn bark. Flattened grass. A smear of darkened earth where something had been dragged, briefly, then lifted again. No one spoke about what it meant, but everyone understood. The mountain was no longer silent. It was confessing. Far above, Ethan woke to voices echoing faintly through the trees. At first he thought it was another dream, his mind offering comfort it could not deliver. Then the sound repeated, closer, human, imperfect. He tried to shout, pain cutting the effort short, but relief surged anyway. Someone was coming. Below, the tracker halted the team again. The bear's path curved, circling, then breaking away sharply. Another set of smaller tracks appeared near the edge, dragging, uneven, leading downhill. A medic swore under his breath. A supervisor stared at the ground longer than necessary, then ordered a faster push. Ethan saw movement between branches. Orange fabric. A helmet. He lifted his arm weakly, fingers trembling. When the first rescuer spotted him, the shout cracked with disbelief. They ran carefully, suddenly gentle, as if loud motion might break him. Hands were on him. Warm. Real. Questions came, overlapping, urgent. Ethan tried to answer, but only his father's name escaped his mouth. Someone squeezed his shoulder, told him to breathe, told him he was safe now. He did not believe it yet. As they carried him downhill, a ranger stayed behind, eyes fixed on the tracks leading away into thicker forest. The bear's prints were clear there, deliberate, purposeful. They did not return. Day 12 ended with helicopters and headlines. Found alive. Miracle. Survival. The story moved quickly for everyone else. But for those who had followed the tracks, the truth felt heavier. One path led to rescue. The other led deeper into the mountain, where a father had made his final stand. As night fell again, plans shifted quietly. The search was not over. It had simply changed direction, guided now by what the bear had left behind, and by the certainty that understanding would come at a cost none of them were ready to pay. The mountain held the remaining answers close, releasing them only through patience and pain. Somewhere above the tree line, wind erased yesterday's snowfall, while below, paperwork and statements waited. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, clutching fragments of memory and guilt. For the search leaders, sleep would not come easily. The tracks demanded follow-through. Morning would bring a new mission, one that no longer asked if someone was lost, but where the truth had gone and how much of it could still be recovered. Those answers waited uphill, where bear and man had crossed paths under watching trees at dawn again soon. The truth did not come all at once. It surfaced in fragments, shaped by memory and pain, by questions Ethan could barely answer and silences no one tried to fill. In the hospital room, machines hummed softly while rain tapped the window, echoing the mountain he could not escape. A ranger sat beside the bed, notebook closed. He spoke gently, telling Ethan he could stop any time. Ethan nodded, eyes fixed on his hands. When he began, his voice was thin but steady, carrying the weight of days without sleep. He told them about the night, about the rocks, about the sound that wasn't wind. His words slowed when he reached the moment Daniel stood up, injured and shaking, and chose to face what was coming. Ethan's throat tightened, but he continued, because stopping felt worse. He described the order to run. How it shattered him. How Daniel shouted again, louder, angrier, forcing him to move. Ethan's hands trembled as he spoke, remembering the way his father had looked at him then, not afraid, not pleading, only determined. Daniel had known. Ethan understood that now. Known his injury made escape impossible. Known the bear would not stop unless something else held its attention. The separation had not been chaos. It had been deliberate. The ranger did not interrupt. He wrote nothing. When Ethan finished, the room felt unbearably small. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang, life continuing without regard. Days later, they returned to the mountain. This time, the search followed the tracks all the way. The forest gave up pieces slowly. Torn fabric. A broken branch shaped by a human hand. Signs of struggle that told a clear, brutal story without needing words. They found Daniel near a stand of aspens, the ground disturbed deeply around him. There was no drama in the discovery. Only quiet, respectful movement. Someone removed a hat. Someone else looked away. Daniel's body showed the truth of the choice he had made. He had stood his ground long enough. Long enough for his son to live. The bear's tracks circled once, then moved on, uninterested when the fight was done. Ethan was not there when they brought Daniel down. He did not need to see it. He already carried the image inside him, etched deeper than sight. The guilt followed him everywhere, whispering questions without answers. At the memorial, people spoke about bravery and sacrifice. Ethan listened from the back, detached. Those words felt too clean. Too distant from the blood and fear and sound of breath in the dark. Love, he realized, was quieter than any speech. That night, Ethan dreamed of the forest again. But this time, his father did not shout. He smiled, tired but calm, and turned away on his own terms. Ethan woke with tears soaking his pillow and a strange sense of peace cutting through the grief. The separation had saved him. It had broken him too. Both truths existed together, inseparable. As weeks passed, Ethan healed physically, though the limp remained. Interviews faded. Headlines moved on. But the story did not end. It waited. Because what Daniel had done did not disappear with him. It lingered in the tracks, in the choices made under pressure, in the understanding that survival often demands unbearable loss. And soon, Ethan would have to decide how to live with what had been given back to him, and what had been taken forever, as the final chapter of endurance prepared to unfold. The doctors called it survivor's guilt, explaining it softly, clinically, as if naming it might shrink its power. Ethan nodded, pretending to understand, while inside he replayed moments endlessly, searching for different outcomes that never existed. He wondered if he had hesitated too long, if one more second might have changed anything. At night, he traced the scar on his ankle and imagined his father's pain mirrored there, a connection he refused to let fade. The mountain no longer appeared in dreams as an enemy, but as a witness, holding memories it would never return. That knowledge settled heavily, preparing him for the reckoning still ahead. Those unanswered moments followed him into every silent waking. The official statement used careful language. It said the boy had been located alive after 12 days in extreme wilderness conditions. It praised coordination, endurance, and timing. It did not describe how small Ethan looked when they carried him out, or how his fingers clung to the medic's jacket as if letting go might undo everything. The helicopter ride blurred into noise and vibration. Ethan drifted in and out, pain folding into exhaustion. Every time his eyes opened, someone was there, checking, reassuring, grounding him in the present. He answered when spoken to, though his voice sounded distant even to himself. At the hospital, warmth returned slowly. Blankets. 4 lines. Light that did not flicker. Doctors spoke in calm tones, listing injuries that could be treated, conditions that could improve. They said he was lucky. Ethan stared at the ceiling and wondered what luck meant anymore. His mother arrived before the pain medication fully wore off. She crossed the room without hesitation and held him, careful of wires and bruises, her body shaking despite herself. Ethan pressed his face into her shoulder and breathed her in, grounding himself in something real. He did not cry then. He felt hollow. News spread quickly. Reporters waited outside. Phones buzzed with messages from people he barely remembered. The world wanted a miracle, a clean ending. Ethan was not ready to give them one. When the ranger returned, he brought updates spoken gently. They had followed the tracks further. They had found where Daniel had fallen. They were still working. Ethan listened without interruption, his jaw tight, understanding more from what was not said. Recovery became routine. Physical therapy. Questions from counselors. Nightmares that woke him gasping. Sometimes he smelled pine where there was none. Sometimes he heard his father's voice and turned before remembering. The headline read "Found alive" in large letters. Beneath it, Smaller text mentioned the father still missing. Ethan read it once and handed the paper back without comment. As days passed, his strength returned unevenly. His ankle healed slowly, leaving stiffness that reminded him daily of the mountain. The doctors encouraged him to talk. He did, when he could. Other times, he sat quietly, letting memories surface on their own terms. One afternoon, a nurse mentioned how rare it was, surviving that long alone. Ethan nodded. Alone felt like the wrong word. He had never been alone. He had been carried forward by a decision made for him. Outside, the search continued quietly, methodically. No cameras. No announcements. Those involved knew what they were looking for now. Closure, not hope. Ethan watched snowfall from his window weeks later, the season changing without him. He thought about the mountain, about how it had taken and given without judgment. He understood now that being found alive was not an ending. It was a beginning shaped by loss. The doctors cleared him to leave. As his mother packed, a ranger stopped by one last time. He said they would keep searching until there was nothing left to find. Ethan thanked him, meaning it. That night, as he lay in a real bed, the forest returned in his dreams. But this time, the path was clear. He walked until it ended, then stopped, unafraid. Somewhere behind him, the past waited. Ahead, something uncertain but real. Being found alive had saved his body. What came next would decide what it saved inside him, as memory and meaning began their final reckoning. Weeks passed before Ethan could speak about the mountain without his voice breaking. Winter settled in Colorado, covering the trails in snow, softening the scars left behind. Life resumed around him in quiet, ordinary ways, but he remained paused somewhere between what had happened and what it meant. He returned to school slowly. Hallways felt loud, crowded, unreal. People looked at him differently, with caution or curiosity, as if survival had changed his shape. Teachers spoke gently. Friends didn't know what to say. Ethan learned how to nod, how to smile, how to move through conversations without letting anyone see too far inside. At night, memories came uninvited. Not the attack, not the fear, but moments before it. His father explaining how to read the sky, how to listen to wind, how to stay calm when things went wrong. Those memories hurt, but they also anchored him. They were proof of something the mountain had failed to erase. The investigation closed quietly. Official reports summarized facts without emotion. A bear encounter. Fatal injuries. Timeline confirmed. The mountain was not blamed. It never was. Nature, they said, had followed its rules. Ethan read the report once, then folded it away, understanding that truth did not need repetition. On a clear morning in early spring, Ethan and his mother returned to the trailhead. Snow still clung to shadows, but the path was visible again. They did not hike far. Just enough to stand where the photograph had been taken months before. No cameras this time. No witnesses. Ethan closed his eyes and breathed in pine and cold earth. He imagined his father beside him, steady and quiet. He did not apologize. He did not say goodbye. He stood there long enough to feel the weight ease slightly, then turned back. The bear had taken a life. It had taken safety. It had taken innocence. But it had not taken memory. It had not taken love. It had not taken the choice Daniel made, or the meaning behind it. Those things remained, carried forward. Years later, Ethan would speak about survival differently. Not as victory, not as miracle, but as responsibility. Living meant honoring what was given, and what was lost. It meant carrying the story without letting it consume him. The mountain still stood, unchanged. Trails faded and returned. Snow fell and melted. Somewhere deep in the forest, tracks vanished beneath time. But the truth remained clear. What the bear didn't take was everything that mattered.